Yeah.
Okay, so if you have questions, jump in. But today, what we're going to talk about is how to buy land and build a house. This is something that tons of people are interested in doing. You hear it all the time on the internet. You see all these floor plans, whatever. And a lot of people get stopped from ever starting or ever getting into this because they're like, I don't know where to start. No one will give me a loan. Everything's so expensive. So today I want to kind of talk through what the process is really like and what you can expect. So the most common misconception that I want to put to bed here today is that buying land and building a house will be cheaper than buying an existing home. Everybody wants that to be the case. A lot of people get frustrated when they start looking for a home and it costs 500 grand to get a piece of junk that needs another couple hundred grand put into it. And they're like, I'll just buy land to build a house. And then they'll say something like, well, what about a modular home or a manufactured home or a barn dominium? I can do that for cheap, right? I saw it on the internet. And what really happens here is it doesn't cost more because the costs stack up from the foundation building and the local ordinances. And usually it's the shipping cost from wherever those modular homes are built that end up making it completely cost prohibitive or to the point that it would make more sense to build it cheap. So, who am I and why do I have the authority to speak on this? My name is Amy Dills. I'm a local real estate agent. During the pandemic, my husband and I bought 25 acres of land on the St. Croix River in Minnesota, and we built our own house. So I have been through this adventure myself personally. As a real estate agent, I help people do this process themselves. I've been helping them buy land and build houses and question builders and architects. And do I even need an architect? And we found this plan online. And so I've learned a few things along the way, so I'm here to tell you it. Okay, so step one is we got to find land. There is land all over the place, especially in our area. And the first thing that you'll have to decide is how much land do I want? If you're a person who's coming from the cities, you might be like, "Oh, just an acre. I don't need that much land, right?" And a lot of times when we start looking at land, an acre feels like a ton. But a lot of times, once you get out on some land, what you're actually looking for is privacy. And if you have 1 to 5 acres, you may not have enough land for privacy. And if you're coming from a subdivision in the suburbs, that might sound like a crazy thing to say, but I promise you, 1 acre is kind of small, 5 acres also kind of small. Once you get over 5 acres, a lot of the limitations that you run into with can I keep this or build that or do that kind of go away. So most people who are looking for privacy probably want at least 5 acres, and then you probably want to set an upper cap. Most people aren't out here trying to have 40 or 80 or 100 acres, and if you are, oftentimes that's a little bit harder to find, and you might have to go further away from any city center to find that. Once you've found a piece of land, you're going to have a lot of questions that you need to get answered because just because you own this land doesn't mean you can do whatever you want with it, even though we think that's how it should be, right? So we have our piece of land, we got to figure out what we can build on it and is it even buildable? There are a lot of different overlaying political, zoning, local ordinance type stuff that you have to figure out. So when you are buying land, your best friend is going to be the county zoning person. Okay, so you want to get very comfortable getting on county websites and figuring out who to call. You might be really good at reading zoning ordinances, and I think you should absolutely get comfortable with those. However, not all counties have these online, and in some areas, are multiple boards that need to get consulted. For example, in our area, we have a township and a county who were in charge of what we did. We also had a scenic overlay district, and they had their 2 cents that they wanted to throw in. So you want to make sure you're talking to someone who can make you aware of all of the different parties that have to be in. Now, a couple of the really trending things that you see on the internet, like tiny homes and barn dominiums, people want to build them, but counties don't want you to. So many counties do have zoning restrictions that do not allow for buildings to be shorter than 15 feet or 20 feet on their I want to say this right. Longest side, right? So or on the shortest side of the house cannot be shorter than 50 feet. A lot of people have rules where you cannot build a structure that has metal siding. You cannot build a structure that looks like a shed or a garage or a barn dominium and put plumbing in it. You cannot have plumbing in a detached structure. So there are a ton of different rules that honestly are pretty silly, if you ask me. And limit people from being able to do what they want to do on their land. But those are the rules of the game that you're going to have to play by when you go to build. Okay, so step one is always to locate some land in an area that you're comfortable with. And before you move forward, honestly, even with going to go look at land, you should have a conversation with the powers that be, which you start smallest and go biggest, right? So it's probably a city. If a city doesn't manage an area, there might be a township. If a township doesn't manage it, it's probably the county, okay? And it might be one or both or all three of those who are playing by the rules. When you call them up and inquire, you should be friendly.
Question.
Yeah,
I got a question.
go, go.
Um, in Wisconsin, I know a lot of the townships require they have a minimum of what you can and cannot build on.
Everyone has that. That will be in those zoning ordinances, like how
Yeah,
big the piece of the land itself is.
right. Yep. And like even like the shape of it too.
Mm-hmm. So there's
Yeah.
setback. That's such a good point. There's setbacks that you have to play with, and it all depends on what the district it's in are. So, for example, there was just a really cute little piece of riverfront property in my town for sale last year, and it was super cheap. It was like 19 grand, right? So tons of interest. You drive over there, and it is really just the cliff down to the river. You could never build anything on it. It was not a buildable lot, and yet people were like, "Oh my gosh, that's great." There's another parcel in my town right now that there's this weird, the home burned down, and it was a single family residential zoning, but the county's comprehensive or the city's comprehensive plan is converting that to commercial. And so if the property gets sold and a building permit is approved before 1 year from when the property burnt down, it can still be a single family. But if it's 1 day past that, this will now have to be a commercial property and it has a whole new set of rules. So that is why it's always really important to talk to the zoning administrator first. You should be friendly with them. You should be nice. You should be polite. You should be respectful. This is a person you'll be in a relationship with for a pretty long time. So, yes, absolutely. Definitely there's minimums. And there's maximums, right? My house that I built is actually like couple feet too tall, right? And so if you were not friendly, someone might be like, hey man, you got to knock a couple feet off your house. That's not a real easy thing to do. Okay. So make sure you check those boxes before you make an offer on a piece of land or go and contract on a piece of land. Okay. Once you have that reasonably figured out for your land in the area that you're looking, you should go look for some land. And land can be easy to find. It can also be really hard to find. Land gets sold a lot of times on the internet, and there are a ton of land scams that happen where someone calls up an old person and takes their name, takes their information, and basically then calls a real estate agent and says, please list this home. And they pretend to be this other person, or not this home, this vacant land. No signs on the property. Please list it on the internet. The land gets sold and hopefully it gets caught by the title company before it actually goes. But there have been many cases where land has been sold out from under people via identity theft in this way. So you want to make sure that um, that's not the case, which means you need to have a good title company. But when you're looking for land, you should always be paying attention when you're driving around. A lot of hunters have this special app. So if you're not a real estate agent and you happen to be a hunter, have a hunter in your life, they have parcel maps and you can see ownership that's, this is this many acres and here's the boundary. So sometimes if you're driving around and you see a beautiful piece of land, using an app like that can be a good way to figure out who owns it. And you can oftentimes just call them up and say, hey, I'm looking for land in the area. I notice you own this. Would you consider selling? Do you know anybody else who might have some land? Land very often gets sold in word of mouth. Sometimes you can find it listed in the MLS. Sometimes there's for sale by owner. Sometimes there's signs that have been out there for so long you don't even know if that's a current phone number or contact or whatever. Okay. Then we want to consider the pricing, the amenities, and the available utilities on a property. Okay. When we bought this land, we were like, cool, yeah, whatever. It's so magical. It's beautiful. We can imagine our life here, right? And then we got into it and we're like, oh, shoot, there's no natural gas. Okay. And so a lot of people just get propane, right? Because they're like, cool, yeah, that's what you do out here. But being a good suburban mom, I was like, ew, I don't want to look at a propane tank, right? Because I shop at Whole Foods. Okay. What am I doing out here in the sticks now? It was definitely a big adjustment. So then I had the choice, okay, do I want to pay to run? Natural gas is 1,000 feet away. Do I want to pay to have that run down here? That is like 850 bajillion dollars. Nope, also not an option. What are my other options? It's propane or electric, right? Now I have a decision to make. Same thing with electricity. We had electricity at the street, but we chose to build our house further off the road. So that was like a very different situation than if you build a house up close to the road. So you want to know, is there electricity in the street, at the street? Usually you can tell that if there's power lines, but some places have buried power lines, so you don't know that. Is your property on city water and sewer, or is it going to require a well and septic? And if it is going to require a well and septic, you got you got to figure out, back to our friends at the zoning department, what the rules are for putting those in. So some areas have different rules for different types of septic systems, tanks, mounds, holding system, drain fields, all that kind of stuff. It really is property specific. So again, that's something you want to go back to the county to find out about. We also want to find out about things like the good old internet. I don't know about you, but I don't really want to buy a house or build a house somewhere that I can't get online. So you should figure that out. Do your phones work? What internet's available? What who's the power company? Where do we get our gas if we need gas? And what are our options for that type of stuff? Once we have those things figured out, we need to figure out price. And the thing about land is that I think price is pretty made up. I have sold a lot, sold a lot of real estate, and I typically find that with houses, it's a lot easier to be like, well, that house looks like this house looks like that house. They reasonably should value the same, and there's a lot of comparable sales. With land, especially when you get into larger acreage, people just make it up, and they will be like, well, I think this land's worth 20 grand an acre, or I think this land's worth 13 grand an acre, or I think this land's worth 5 grand an acre. Okay. And the things that are appealing in land might be different for different people, right? Sometimes you'll see commercial property that's a complete swamp and they want $2 million for it because it gets a lot of traffic driving by it, and maybe that's good. And maybe someone will buy it for that because they have some sort of business that might work there. But land, because it is so particular to each person, what I think is a beautiful piece of land and what you think is a beautiful piece of land is very different. So when you're looking at pricing on land, you definitely want to look for similarities. Can you find a parcel? If you got 5 acres, it's also 5 acres. It's in the same county. Is it on a busy road or in a neighborhood? Is it off a private street? Does it back up to wetland? Is it waterfront? Okay, we always want to try to find something similar to compare those prices to so we can get ourselves in the ballpark. Okay. With land, with land, you get a lot of people who own the property outright, and they don't often have a strong motivation to sell it. And so I find a lot of times with buyers, if it's not the right relationship, you may often just have to pay their price to get the person to let it go. It's unlike a home where people need to get rid of it, they don't want to rent it out, whatever. A piece of land is very easy for people to hold for a long, long time without doing any maintenance other than paying property taxes. So sometimes with land, you're going to get a seller with a price and you're going to have to pay it whether you like it or not. It's just how it goes. Does anyone have any questions there so I can catch my breath for a second?
Nope.
Awesome. Okay, once we've got our piece of land, we want to make an offer. Okay? And this is where we get a little bit of cart before the horse, or where does the horse go? Do I even have a cart yet? Okay, and that's for a couple of reasons. When you buy land, your purchasing options are I can pay all cash for it. If you can do that, makes your life easy, unless you need that cash for something else, might make it more complicated. Okay, you can buy it on a contract for deed, which a lot of land purchases happen on a contract for deed, but most of the time you cannot improve the land until you pay off the contract for deed. So you can buy it that way, now you own it, but before you start digging a hole, you have to pay off that contract for deed, so you're going to need another type of financing. You can get a land only type of financing, but most of the time those require 45 to 65% down. At which point, you should probably just buy all the land. That's a big down payment, okay? The other type of loan you can get for a piece of land is a land plus construction in one, okay? This, for many people, is the best option, but in order to get this type of financing, you have to have a builder and a set of plans and a budget, which if you've been looking for land, you may or may not have, because when you have this land, you'll call up a builder and you'll say, hey, I'd like to build a house like this. And they'll say, where's your land? And if you have your land, they can come out there and say, okay, this house is suitable for, or this land is suitable for a walkout or a full basement or whatever. And there are going to be some different site requirements for each one. If you do not have your land, the builder will most likely say, call me back when you have your land. Okay. So now we find ourselves in a position where we've found this land and we want to do this acquisition plus construction loan in one. And we got to hurry up and find a builder, and we got to hurry up and have some plans, and we got to hurry up and know how much it costs, because we need to have all of those things at the beginning before we can close on this land. So this is the thing where we have to line things up in the right way. Where do you start? It's a little different for everyone. If you happen to know a builder that you know you want to work with, that can be a really good place to start. What do you build? What areas do you build in? Do you have a rough pricing model that we can work with? Are there things that we should be looking at while we're shopping for land that might make our price go up or down or whatever? If we know we want to walk out, what are we looking for in our land? What type of soil is important? These are some things you could ask that person. A lot of people these days are like, well, I need my design first. I have to start with my house plan. So they'll start with an architect or a designer. I think, and I've had people go through the architect thing. I had another project that I started with architects with. Architects will add at least $300,000 to your build cost straight out the gates before you do anything. And you might not get $300,000 worth of value. That's been my experience. I think if you have a particular situation or a particular style you're trying to work with, perhaps you want to work with an architect. But in general, to get a good set of building plans, you will need to work with an architectural drafter or a designer. And fortunately, you can get one of those for about 5,000 bucks. Okay. Now, they might not draw something that's cute or architecturally distinct or the style that you like. You might also be on the internet and looking at, houseplans.com or like a barn dominium or whatever. You can definitely use those plans, but I would urge you to not buy those plans. Okay. Those plans are cute designs on the internet. If you go ahead and pay for them, you will likely still have to pay an architectural drafter or a CAD person to redraw those plans to your site and to spec, because most of those are pretty pictures on the internet that you will buy for $5,000 that you cannot actually build. Okay. This goes back again to your zoning, to your location, right? If you are buying those plans, you could be in California or Arizona. They have very different building styles than we have here. And so we're going to need different types of foundations and walls and all that kind of stuff. Once you have your plans, your builder can bid it. Okay. And some builders do a very formal bid process where they send it out to all of their subcontractors. And some builders are just like, price per square foot, I think it's going to be about here. And you probably want more like the one that's been fully bidded. but you at minimum want a guarantee of if we get all the way to the end and the price changes based on these things, we have pre-agreed that these are where it can change and these are where it will not change. Okay? Because the thing that happens with new construction is the cost always goes up, never goes down, and it always seems like it's your fault as the consumer, and nobody likes their builder when they're done. So the more of this stuff that you can kind of pre-agree before you get started, the better. And that starts before you even have a piece of land, before you even have a project to work on. Okay. So we need to have all of these pieces, and sometimes we have to be able to get this information quickly because you might be trying to get all of this accomplished in a 45-day period. So if you're thinking about buying land and building, you should absolutely be having conversations with builders. They should not charge you for these. These should be like a consultation, conversation type thing where you're getting to know them, you're building a relationship with them. Is this someone that you want to get into, call it a 2-year relationship with? If you don't like them in your 1 hour introductory meeting, you're really not going to like them next year. And you're super not going to like them a year after that when your house isn't done and you're paying interest on your incomplete construction loan. Okay. The same thing with a designer. Do they have a designer they work with? Can you influence them with some cute photos from the internet, right? The more stuff you have prepared. So you should spend time going in other houses. Do you like a one level? Do you like a two-story? Do you need whatever? All that stuff that you like, you should be able to describe that very quickly because once you get going, you are going to be on someone's clock and they're going to be billing you at over $100 an hour for all of the time that you say, change this back, move that over there. Can we add this? What do you think about this? So as much of that as you can have figured out before you even find your land, the more cost effective you're going to be when it comes time to design. Does anyone have questions about that stuff? There's a ton there. You could probably do 3 hours on just that piece of it. Okay, awesome. So once we got our land, reasonably the kind of house that we want, reasonably the person that we want to build it with, and reasonably the design, we should be able to actually buy it, which sounds crazy. So if we're doing our land plus construction in one, this is probably going to be 1 or 2 closings. Typically, there's one closing at the beginning where you will close on the land and open your construction loan. The builder will then take draws off that construction loan. You, as the owner, will now be paying interest only on that loan as the builder draws off of it. So your payments will start off pretty low, and the further along your house gets, they're going to get much more expensive. Construction loan interest is usually a couple points above what a regular conventional loan is. So you should expect it to be there. And they usually have a 1 to 2 year term. Usually it's about a year. So their goal is to get your house built and completed in a year. When your house is done, you'll have a building inspection and you will get a certificate of occupancy, at which point you should be able to refinance or close out of that construction loan and go into whatever your permanent financing is. Builder's now paid off. You're no longer paying interest only. You now have your new permanent mortgage, and whatever equity you created by building a house on this land is effectively your down payment. You do not usually need to bring an additional down payment. Questions on that? Okay. Some things that come up during this process usually have to do with expectations that were not clearly set and emotions that run high during a build process. If you are buying a house, this process is limited. It's scrunched in to about 30 to 45 days of like we wrote an offer and then we had an inspection and then it's closing. So like most of the time you'll have a few options to have big emotions. But over the course of building a house, it could be 6 months in the design process and another 6 to 12 months in the building process. You're going to be uncomfortable. You're going to be spending money. You're not going to be sure if your house is going to get done on time. Your builder might do some stuff that doesn't look right. Your builder's going to have some expected delays, right? Weather's going to happen. Crews aren't going to show up. Stuff's not going to go right. The city's going to, require you to do something differently. So if you plan for at least 2x of the trouble that you're expecting, You should get through it not unscathed, but that's a more realistic expectation than just, oh, okay, we paid this builder. He's great. Look at this house he built. I went through this house and it looked beautiful. Okay. You're seeing the end product. You are not seeing the months and years of hassle and stress and things that could go wrong during that time. The other thing that happens is builders get really frustrated with buyers because buyers like to change their mind. Oh, I saw this really cute thing on the internet. Do you think we could do this? How about wallpaper? Oh, would it be? And that takes them away from their main job. And I think the biggest reason why builders and buyers struggle with each other is builders usually started a home building company because they were in construction. And so if we can remember this as we're going into it, they were in construction. They loved doing framing or flooring or tile, whatever their field was, and they were like, I could do this whole thing. Most builders did not go through a sales process. They probably have never worked in customer service. They probably also have never had an administrative job. And so we as a consumer expect to be sold in a certain way. We expect to be customer serviced in a certain way, and we expect administration to be done in a certain way. And most builders just simply do not have that experience. Now, should they have that because they're running a home building company? Absolutely. And those might be some things you want to think about when you're getting in. Does my builder have someone that does admin or design or answer my questions or do the numbers? Or is it all just this one guy doing all that stuff? And how possibly skilled can he be with that? So if I expect him to construct a well-built home, and I understand that probably there will be some holes in the customer service that I'm expecting, I'm going to have a better experience than if I'm expecting this person to give me the type of service that I've come to know and expect when I make other purchases. Because really, most people only build a house once in their life. There are very few people who do it over and over and over again. So this is going to be a journey that you are going to be on for a while. And if you want to get set up for success, you really need to have someone guide you. So if you ever have any questions about the new construction process or what it's like to buy land and build in a neighborhood, work with a builder, any of that kind of stuff, I'm always here to help. Give me a call. Thanks for coming. Have a great day.